Brine says he is passionately in favor of so-called fairer votes. Steve, if you're so passionate, then why can't you say what you mean instead of rant on about Nick Clegg? Maybe your ambiguous statement is just a simple provocation. If it isn't, then you should be mature enough to explain it. Steve, for me, one of the voters in the referendum who is also in your constituency, the alternative vote is not about you, or Nick Clegg, or David Cameron, or Wallace and Gromit. It's about me and thousands of others being fairly represented in Parliament. I've had the vote for over 40 years and only felt represented a handful of times. Do you not see, Steve, that there is something not quite right about that? It's to do with fairness and feeling represented. Yes, Steve, you must be joking if you think that I feel represented by you. You seem obsessed with winners and losers. For most of my voting life, my votes have been binned as losing votes. The bin of losing votes has been bigger than the bin of winning votes. All votes should not only be counted, but actually count. Obviously, proportional representation would make all votes count. AV is a step towards it since at least 50% of the votes would count. Steve says the winner should be the winner. He says he tends to take the rather old-fashioned view that election should be won by the candidate with the most votes. I take the fair view. I believe that the candidate with the most, that is 50% plus support, measured with votes, should win. Did you get that, Steve? The candidate with the most support should win. Steve says AV is not wanted. Dear Steve, I and others do want it. I have been waiting for 40 years for better representation. Steve says, first past post creates strong governments and a smooth and quick transition of power. I say, strong governments help destroy British industry. Strong governments dragged us into unwanted wars with the help of lying to us. Strong governments squandered money and power, leaving us with today's budget problems and a more frugal future. Strong governments have seemed more like serial dictatorships to some extent. Just reflect on what Tony Blair's strong governments got us into, wars and debts. Was that a good thing, Steve? Steve says AV is not the reform we need. I say, stop being obsessed with Nick Clegg and yourself and think about the people you represent. I am one of them. If there is a reform you think we need, then stand up, say what it is, and be counted. Don't write about so-called fairer votes without explaining yourself. It does not do you credit and makes you appear rather dodgy. Prime Minister David Cameron says if you vote for a fringe party who gets knocked out, your other preferences will be counted. You get another bite of the cherry. I don't like to say the obvious, but the PM needs to take some maths lessons. In the second round, if there is one, everyone's votes are counted and everyone gets a second bite of the cherry. It's sad that the PM talks about biting into cherries rather than about the maths and the fairness of representation. He also says that he doesn't think he could tell us exactly how AV works. What kind of PM have we got? It's not rocket science, David. If the Prime Minister isn't bright enough to understand the AV system, why is he PM? And what about our economy? It's far more complex than the AV voting system. He seems to be spending on creating more peers in the House of Lords. That seems a real waste of money. How about reforming the House of Lords through proportional representation? But that is another story for another day, in probably another century. The PM again says that AV is a system that no one wants. Thank you, David, but I can't talk for myself and say that I do want AV. I would prefer proportional representation, but at least AV is partway and better than the minority representation of some governments so far. Why does the PM write such drivel? Well, he is more interested in what he wants rather than what the electorate wants. He is more interested in control rather than fairness. Have you seen the advert supporting the MO site on TV? The one with a poorly prepared teacher and the clueless students. If she was a real teacher, she would have made herself virtually unemployable in education. If students were as inept as that, then the country would be in a bad way. Students aren't that daft, though. They just might feel offended at being portrayed like that. The MO campaign is also obsessed with Nick Clegg. It's not about him, it's about us voters being fairly represented in Parliament. It's not about runners running a race, it's about electors electing representatives in a fairer way. Search your conscience and vote for a fairer society. Even a fairer big society. Vote for AV. It's a tiny step in the right direction that I've been turning gray waiting for over 40 years. Be fair. Vote Voteyestoav.